welcome back to Misty Mountain Gaming. I'm the D&D wannabe, my name is Rob, and welcome to the second of our little two-part series involving things that a dungeon master needs to run a game of Dungeons & Dragons. Online edition. Once again, be ready to forgive a perhaps small dip in video quality as I'm doing this with a green screen and in my Twitch studio, rather than at my normal home YouTube set. As an added bonus, though, you're about to get to see my Twitch setup, such as it is, because this is also where I run D&D online for my friends. So, without much further ado, let's get to it. Are you ready? Let's begin. Oh yeah, I know what you're thinking. Pretty sweet, right? Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Joking aside, I know my Twitch setup isn't going to win any awards, but it does its job, and here's how I use it for running D&D. Now, as we discussed last time, you're going to need to do a lot of the same things, whether you're running D&D in person or online. The tools you use to accomplish these same tasks may look a little different because of the medium. So, just like when you're running D&D in person, one of the primary things you're going to need to be able to run the game is information about the campaign. If it's a published adventure, a PDF, or the physical copy of the book nearby, or a website like D&D Beyond can fill you in on all the information that you need to get through your campaign. Otherwise, it's probably a notebook, a Word or Google document, or perhaps a OneNote note, or a physical notebook even, with everything that you have written about your campaign. Whatever shape this document takes, make sure that you have it close to hand, because it's likely that you're going to be referencing it a good bit as you play. For me, this takes a couple of different forms. I have used a Google document before so that I can access it from any device, anywhere. Microsoft OneDrive has similar functionality, as does Samsung Notes, since I'm a Samsung user. You could also use a website like World Anvil, a website specifically designed with keeping track of information about your campaign and the adventures that take place there in mind. As before, you're probably going to want to reference more than just the campaign notes as you're running the game. Rules are going to come up, and in case you don't have them all memorized or you don't trust your memory, you're going to need some way to reference the rules on the fly as you play the game. You can do this pretty easily just by having a pile of the rule books somewhere close by, but it's much more convenient, since you're already sitting down at a computer to play virtually, to Google the answer to your questions, or to look them up on a reference site like D&D Beyond, or occasionally Roll20, or whatever virtual tabletop that you're using may have system reference documents included. We'll talk about those in a minute, but in all honesty, I still just use the phone. Especially since a lot of my games are streamed these days, doing too much on the computer other than managing the stream can get a little problematic. So, looking down at my phone for a second to quickly type something out and get a quick answer to a question is generally the way that I'm going to go. The next thing you'll likely notice is that I still brought a notepad with me to work today. It's really hard for me to get away from those guys, I know. No matter how you're playing the game, notebooks are a handy tool. The act of writing something down physically helps embed whatever you are writing in your memory. So it's a great way to make sure that you have the information you need, whether or not you misplace the notebook. The use of the notebook in this medium is twofold. I still want to use it to keep track of my notes for this session. Whatever is happening in the moment that I feel like is going to be important later, or that I want to make sure that I remember, and make it into my campaign notes for the rest of the adventure, I'm going to write down. And then, at the end of the session, all of those notes are going to be transferred to whatever document I'm creating to keep track of the adventure, be it a Word document, Google document, or otherwise. This little notebook also serves the function that the sticky notes served when I'm playing in real life. Anything that I want to make sure that I remember to bring up during the session, any little notes that I want right in front of me while I am running the game, are going to go in that notebook. There's a lot of stuff that's going to be on screen and distracting. I might have a tab open here or click over to another window here, but that page sitting right in front of me in that notebook is going to remain. And I will occasionally look down at it as we run the game to make sure I'm doing everything I set out to do. Regardless of how you're playing the game still does involve dice. And there are a lot of options when it comes to rolling dice for an online D&D game. If you're using a virtual tabletop, it almost certainly has some built-in way to go ahead and generate those random numbers for you. Also, if you're using a website like D&D Beyond to keep track of your character sheet and what modifiers you would add to particular rolls, they have ways for you to roll online as well. And honestly, they all work effectively enough, as well as any other method. But I think rolling dice is fun. So, I make sure that I always bring my own dice when I'm coming to any game of D&D, whether it's online or otherwise. The act of physically rolling the dice is part of what makes this game fun for me, and what makes it a game at all. So, even though there are lots of people out there that have opinions about players rolling dice where the dungeon master can't see, or vice versa, I still roll dice every time I play. And come to think of it, if my players and I aren't going to be honest about what these little math rocks actually roll while we're playing a completely make-believe adventure, we probably have bigger problems than what may or may not happen in the campaign. Next up are visual aids. Now, if anyone has watched me running D&D on Twitch over at Misty Mountain Streaming, I don't typically go about this in the way that I'm about to discuss. We typically play games in the theater of the mind, which allows the imaginations of the players and the spectators to pretty much run wild without any real frame of reference, which has its advantages and disadvantages. One of the advantages being that there's a lot more real estate on our Twitch stream that isn't taken up by a battle map of some kind. But when I play at home with friends, or play online with friends, visual aids are very important, and they're part of what makes the game exciting. And you can put a lot of work into making these things very interesting for your players. So, my preferred method of getting information to my players about their characters and what is around them is by using a virtual tabletop like Roll20. Granted, I have spent some money, a good bit of it, unlocking the features that make me happiest in Roll20. But I play a lot of D&D, and all of my players can benefit from the money I've spent and the effort that I put in. So, it was worth it to me. Using a virtual tabletop like Roll20, you're able to dress the scene around your player characters, as well as show them good visual reference up to the second of what their enemies and allies look like and where they are on the battlefield when things get dicey. Pardon the pun. Journals and compendiums can help players keep track of their notes, their characters, as well as basic rules reference. And features like Fog of War and dynamic lighting mean that your players won't be any better informed than their characters are about the danger that they face. This is particularly exciting when you realize that all of your players have a unique perspective on the battlefield. They can only see what their characters can see, and their characters may be looking at different things entirely. This is something that's very difficult to do in person, and can be a real advantage of online play. while you're playing the game of Dungeons and Dragons with your friends, you will need a way to communicate with your friends. This seems obvious, but it is a consideration. You're going to want to be able to see your players while you're playing, and vice versa, or at the very least, hear one another. Of course, it's just my avatar up there now, but when I'm playing, that central screen is studded with the faces of my players. Seeing one another's expressions and being able to feed off one another's energy is a pretty important part of the game, especially for roleplay. So we make that a priority when we play online. That's actually the reason you see 2 webcams up there, is because when I'm streaming, I have one camera dedicated to OBS in Twitch, and another dedicated to showing my face to my players in the Discord call. When I first started out, I did not have 2, and my players could not see me while we ran. We'll just say that that experience made it pretty clear I needed to invest in another webcam as soon as possible. Also, for the sake of communication, you are going to need some headphones and a microphone. They don't have to be separate pieces of equipment. They can be a single one, and they can go over the head or in the ears or whatever you find the most comfortable, convenient, and affordable. But being able to hear and being able to talk are pretty important parts of the game. And, as always, no game of Dungeons and Dragons is ever complete without your preferred beverage. That's it, guys. That's the video. What I bring to the table when I run Dungeons and Dragons online. If you'll recall from our last video, I'm answering this question because it was asked by a member of our Discord community. Not because I am the guru, the authority on the best resources and methods for running Dungeons and Dragons online. I'm just giving you what works for me, but what works for you? What apps, websites, and tools have you discovered that make running D&D online a pleasant experience for yourself and for your players? I'm genuinely excited to hear your answers to this. As always, the easiest way to answer is to pop a comment down below this video. And while you're down there, maybe hit the subscribe button. Ring the bell if you want to be notified when our next video goes up, and maybe give us a like if you're feeling generous. If you'd like to see me practicing what I preach and putting all of my advice to work, I run or play Dungeons and Dragons over on our Twitch channel, Misty Mountain Streaming, twice a week, usually on Mondays and Wednesdays. Link to that channel is in the description of this video. Go check us out, maybe give us a follow, see if there's something worth sticking around for. And as always, if you can't get enough of me talking about how I think the game of Dungeons and Dragons should be run, I am the co-host of a podcast with my twin brother, Bardic Twinspiration. Episodes come out about twice a month these days, and you can hear us giving our hot takes and opinions on everyone's favorite role-playing game. I think that about does it for this video, guys. If you want your question answered on this channel next, pop into the Discord, link in the description of the video, and ask me a question. Maybe yours will be the one I answer next. Until next time, friends and adventurers, farewell, and Godspeed. And features like dynamic lighting and fog of war can make sure that your players don't know anything more about the battlefield than your characters do. And features like fog of war and dynamic lighting mean